Welcome to this visual explainer of some truly incredible source material. We're kicking things off right in the beating heart of a modern concrete jungle, Tokyo Station. Literally hundreds of thousands of people rush through its exits every single day. They're completely surrounded by towering skyscrapers, ultra-fast bullet trains, glowing neon lights, the whole shebang. The Marunouchi and Yaesu exits, they're the absolute lifelines of this massive hub. But there is a hidden, 400-year-old story buried right under the pavement of the Yaesu side. So you might be wondering, why on earth is one of the most bustling, premium financial districts in the very center of Tokyo named after a Dutch sailor? Especially in a country that's historically famous for being, well, closed off to foreigners. When you think of Tokyo districts, Shibuya, Shinjuku, Ueno, Asakusa, they all sound distinctly Japanese. And Yaesu sounds like it perfectly belongs on that list. But it's actually a massive anomaly. It is a Japanese adaptation of a European name.
Okay, let's unpack this linguistic puzzle. Our whole story revolves around a guy named Jan Joosten. Because his Dutch name was understandably a bit of a mouthful for the locals at the time, they kind of adapted it to Yaesu. And as the centuries rolled by, that pronunciation organically shifted to what we now know as Yaesu. So this complicated European name quite literally transformed into some of the most expensive real estate in the entire world. It's wild.
Section 1. The Foreigner in a Center of Tokyo. Subtitle, 1598, A Perilous Journey. Let's meet our protagonist.
Jan Joosten van Lodensteijn was basically just a sailor working for the famous Dutch East India Company on a ship called De Liefde. He definitely wasn't aiming to become some historic diplomatic figure. He was just trying to navigate the high seas for the sake of the spice trade. And the sheer brutality of his journey is striking. They departed from Rotterdam in 1598. Now, because of the 80 Years' War, they had to actively dodge Spanish-controlled routes. That pushed them through the treacherous Strait of Magellan and across the vast Pacific Ocean, battling storms, pirates, and severe disease. By the time De Liefde finally washed up on the shores of Japan in 1600, out of 110 crew members, only 24 starving, decimated men had actually survived. Jan Joosten was one of the lucky few.
Section 2. The Ship That Changed Japan's Fate. Subtitle, Tokugawa Ieyasu's Rise.
You see, Joosten arrived at a massively critical turning point in Japanese history. The nation was politically fractured, and a powerful lord named Tokugawa Ieyasu was right on the verge of unifying the entire country. He desperately needed a strategic edge against his rivals, and Ieyasu brilliantly seized that exact edge. He didn't lock up or execute these starving foreign sailors. Instead, he met with Joosten and the ship's English captain, William Adams. He confiscated the powerful cannons from their battered ship and immediately deployed them to win the pivotal Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, effectively unifying Japan. And just like that, Jan Joosten went from a shipwrecked sailor on the brink of death to a samurai-adjacent diplomat shaping foreign policy. Talk about a career pivot.
For his incredible service as a translator and trade advisor to the new shogunate, Joosten was handsomely rewarded. He was given a house right next to Edo Castle, which was the absolute political epicenter of the country, and actually the site of today's imperial palace. The locals simply started describing the area as the place where Jan Joosten lives, or, as we know, Yaesu. And that, my friends, is exactly how the name first stuck to the map.
Section 3. Not Religion, Just Trade. Subtitle, The Geopolitical Chess Match.
So this brings up a super fascinating historical question. Why did Tokugawa Ieyasu heavily favor these newly arrived ragged Dutchmen over the established, incredibly wealthy European powers, like the Portuguese, who were already operating in Japan? Well, Ieyasu had a brilliant, highly calculated strategy. On one hand, you have Spain and Portugal. They were Catholic, bringing in active Jesuit missionaries since 1549, and their religious agenda was clearly expanding their political influence among local lords. Ieyasu viewed that as a major threat to his rule. On the other hand, you have the Dutch. Sure, they were Protestant, but more importantly, they were purely focused on trade. They had zero religious agenda. They wanted Asian silk and spices, not converts. Ieyasu wanted European goods without the political meddling, so the Dutch were the absolute perfect impartial geopolitical partners.
Section 4. The Only Window to the World. Subtitle, Dejima and the Sakoko Policy.
We often hear in history class that Japan completely isolated itself from the outside world during this period, locking its doors to everyone. But that's not exactly true. Instead of total isolation, they enacted incredibly strict control. The Dutch traders who were allowed to stay were confined entirely to a tiny artificial island called Dutchman in Nagasaki, and it was intense. There was absolutely no free roaming in the city, they couldn't bring their families, and they couldn't leave the island without explicit permission. These harsh restrictions lasted for 2 whole centuries. But here is the critical takeaway. Despite these massive walls, crucial trade, and more importantly a steady stream of information still flowed into Japan.
This restricted flow of information gave birth to a truly remarkable concept, Rangaku, or Dutch learning. Because the Dutch were literally the only Europeans officially allowed to trade, all European knowledge, we're talking books on anatomy, mathematics, chemistry, astronomy, were funneled into Japan exclusively through the Dutch language. Japanese scholars painstakingly translated these texts, creating this amazing secret pipeline of knowledge that quietly fueled Japanese modernization long before the famous Meiji Restoration.
Section 5. Adam's Fame, Joosten's Legacy. Subtitle: The Irony of History.
All right, let's bring this narrative right back to modern Tokyo. There is a massive, almost tragic historical irony when we look at the modern legacy of the 2 main Europeans from that shipwrecked vessel. There's just a stark contrast here. The English captain, William Adams, he went on to achieve worldwide fame. He became the direct inspiration for the character John Blackthorne in James Clavell's legendary novel Shogun and the massive global hit TV shows based on it. He got the full Hollywood treatment. And Jan Joosten, well, he gave his name to one of the most powerful financial districts in Japan, Yaesu, yet he is largely forgotten by the public. Today, there is just a small, overlooked bust of him in an underground shopping mall beneath Tokyo Station. Even the station workers walking right past it every day don't know who he is.
It's a powerful realization that completely reframes the timeline of globalization. Japan's opening to the outside world didn't just abruptly begin with Commodore Perry's black ships in 1853, but much earlier, with silent traders and advisors like Jan Joosten. We are so often taught that global connections are a strictly modern phenomenon, or that Japan's modernization started the second the Americans arrived. But this right here proves that globalization has been happening in the background for centuries, driven by these quiet, incredible exchanges of knowledge and commerce by figures who eventually just faded into the concrete.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Turn the mirror on your own hometown for a second. Every single day we walk down avenues, we catch trains at bustling stations, and we navigate neighborhoods named after people whose incredible, globe-trotting stories have been completely paved over by time. So what forgotten stories lie behind your city's streets? Next time you look up at a street sign, remember Jan Joosten, the forgotten Dutchman of Tokyo, and ask yourself who might be hiding right under your feet. Thanks so much for joining me today. Keep your eyes open to the history all around you, and I'll catch you next time.